Yeah, first and foremost, thank you guys for coming. Enjoy the pizza. Hopefully it's a nice lunch break for you. I also wanted to thank Newman, the gallery, Emily, and Shannon for all of your work and inviting me here. I do appreciate it a lot. I would like to, number one, I'd like to mention that I do have a little bit of a cold, so I might be sipping some warm coffee as my voice goes in and out a little bit. Also, first thing I want to do is, can I see a raise of hands if you have ever been to a doctor? Pretty much everyone. So we're all in here, we're all connected in some way. Go ahead and raise your hand if it was for something more than maybe an annual checkup, a physical, for something a little spicier maybe. Many of you. Raise your hand if you ever walked out frustrated. Yes. Go ahead and raise your hand if you are willing to share a little bit about that. You are. Can you tell me a little bit why you were frustrated? I saw your face and I asked that question and it seemed like you knew something.
Well, first off, I work in healthcare.
Okay.
Well, I teach nursing here now, but I worked in healthcare.
Wonderful. Yes. So you know a lot about it.
So I've been frustrated on both sides.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a time that I might have walked out frustrated. I think a lot of times probably frustration will be is because you can feel like cattle being herded through something in a doctor's office sometimes. You know, there's not a lot of, maybe doesn't feel like there's a lot of time to be very personal or to ask questions, things like that. So I can't think of a specific time, right?
Sure.
In the moment, I'll probably think of it when I leave, but
I totally get it. Yeah, and I'm sure you understand those time constraints on both ends. Yeah, certainly. I had a little conversation with the cameraman right before who had a story about some medication that was incredibly expensive. Turns out there's a coupon. I'm sharing your story. I hope that's okay. A coupon for medication, which is a weird thing, right? Why do we have to Google coupons for things that keep us alive and well? So that's kind of where this project started, was through living in my body and just being frustrated that it felt like I couldn't get care. I also have a sister, she's a graphic designer, she designed this, thank you Christy, who had cervical cancer and had a full hysterectomy. Her doctors actually gave her significantly more chemo and radiation than was probably necessary, and it's destroyed her at the ripe age of 33. So living in my body with two chronic health conditions, trying to get care, trying to go to the doctor's office, and feeling like I'm not being heard and understood, and no one's listening or caring about me. So that's kind of where this project started. It makes sense with the larger body of my work, which is typically about compassion, leaning towards female health and experiences. So while I think we all kind of understand the frustrations with the healthcare system, a lot of the focus of this show is on AFAB, assigned female at birth, or women's healthcare, because the data shows that it has been pretty ugly and it continues to be pretty ugly. So in the back I do have just some stats and data, a couple of fun ones, and I say fun satirically, they're not fun at all. Did you know that they didn't use female crash test dummies until 2011? And even then, it's just a smaller version of the men's. So women are about 70% more likely to be injured and 17% more likely to die in a car crash because we just don't use female crash test dummies. In clinical trials and studies, they consider female cells to be they fluctuate more in hormones, so they're harder to study, so they typically just don't, which is a problem, and trickles down into things like care and drugs. For example, the drug Ambien to help with insomnia. Turns out that dosage was for men, 15% of women after 8 hours, which is the time at which it should have done its work, you had a full night's sleep, you're ready to go on with your day, actually would be considered a DUI. They were still under the influence of the drug and probably should not have been on the road. So all these sorts of trickle-down situations where not only does it feel like I go to a doctor's office and I don't get heard, I'm also not studied in a textbook or considered in the way that I feel like I should be. So all of this was the buildup of frustration that started this body of work, but also ultimately it's about compassion. I understand that it's a complex system, there is no solution. What I am trying to do is sort of bridge the gap between the humanity aspect and the medical science aspect, which I think the more you can bridge that gap, the better understanding you're gonna have on both sides. So what I did is I actually went online, I Googled, and I bought a gynecological kit. I'm not gonna tell you where, because it's terrifying that I could just do this. Yep, here it is, medical grade. It is a little dirty now, I've had it for a couple of years, but I bought it. It was sterilized, it was ready to go. I could have performed a surgery right then and there. Is that terrifying? Absolutely. Should I have been able to do this as a civilian? Probably not, but I did. So I had my gynecological kit and I photographed them as if they were portraits. So I was thinking about these photos as if they were portraits almost of people and the humanity. So I took a lot of care in the lighting of these portraits. This wasn't in a formal studio. I had an assistant. We spent hours just trying to, get the lighting and the framing and the quality as good as it would have been had I been photographing a person. That was the way in which I wanted to treat these tools. Are they simply just utilitarian tools? Yes, but I was trying to view them more as portraits than, as the statement describes, I went around and just interviewed people. So I have, a father figure who is a doctor. I go to doctors. I know a number of nurses, and I know plenty of people and women who go to the doctor. I sat down and I had them tell me their stories of frustration or what have you, and I said, okay, in one word, what would you say is missing or lacking there? So all of these words are from individual people who have their own stories about their medical frustrations, traumas, etc. And as I was creating this giant list, it sort of became poetry. So I added one word to a tool as if to kind of bridge that gap between the utilitarian kind of sterile, almost scary instrument with these words of humanity and compassion, and just trying to bring that personhood back into it, which I know also is a difficult thing because on the medical side you have to be a little dispassionate. You can't care so much that it affects your job. These are tools, they serve a purpose, right? But I think they're also more than that, and perhaps that's a conversation that needs to be had a little bit more. So those were the people that I interviewed. They gave me all of the words, the portraits that I took, I added them together, and then it became a funny conversation of how do you feel when you look at them. So for some people, it just feels scary and terrible because you remember what these things do. There's something kind of poetic about the idea that you almost have to ruin a body, you have to ruin flesh in order to heal it, whether that's by cutting or sewing or opening in some way. So some people just look at these and they tense up and they squeeze up and they don't like it. But some people perhaps in the medical industry look at these and say, oh, like that's a tool and it's for X, Y, and Z. This is a Sims speculum. It was invented by Dr. Sims. It does this. This is how it works. This is what it's for. So it's interesting to see who's affected by what in these. I also wanted to have data in the back there. Hello. We have so many new people. You guys are getting the tail end of this. We might have a Q&A to circle back to some of this. But I also wanted just some data in the back describing actual examples of the hard statistics. I wanted to be very ethical about this, so I did my research. If you're interested, I have a number of suggestions for you. So I did want to be ethical and informed as I was talking about this, knowing that I am not a medical expert. I am simply coming at this from the perspective of someone who's experienced it. I live in my body. I've gone through this. But I wanted to be informed, I wanted the data, and I wanted the proof. In doing so, it was terrifying. The history of medicine and female medicine is shocking. I encourage you to spend some time with some of that data. Those are just a small fraction of the examples. It's getting better. It's not getting better fast enough, in my opinion. So that's another thing that I want to really encourage people to think about and talk about, is the idea that we think that we live in a modern age, we think that equality is happening, medical disparities are perhaps getting better, and they are fractionally. A lot of people care. Obviously, there's a lot of work being done, but there's also still a lot of work to be done. And the state of female healthcare is one of those things that is continually being brought up in our social dialogue, our social commentary. It continues to be relevant. I wish that it was less relevant. This body of work has been happening for 2 years since I started it. It's only become more and more relevant. So those are some of the things that I hope that you think about as you're viewing the work, and I do hope that you grab a pamphlet and continue thinking about the ways in which this affects your life, and if not yours, your friends and family. So with that, I will wrap up and ask you for questions. Yes?
I'm just curious how you laid this out. Did you put the instruments on top of a sheet that had the words, or did you superimpose the words after photographing?
So I actually photographed them on tile. That's an excellent question. So this is a pink tile. Reason being, because I grew up in a school that was probably built in the 70s. I had the girls' pink bathroom and the boys' pink bathroom. And you had the backsplash of the tile. So I wanted to include that tile to again reference gender and also reference the cold hardness of that medical exam room. So it's not just a plain background. I very easily could have graphically imposed that pink background, but I wanted it to be the actual physical tile, so that felt important to me. That's also why the data kind of looks like a kitchen backsplash. I wanted that reference of the tile in there. The actual tools are photographed on that tile, and then yes, I did the graphics on top of that. So I did want to actually do a deboss. So emboss is when words stick out, deboss is when words kind of press into the paper. I wanted to deboss all of the words into this. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a letterpress that was big enough. So it is graphic. So, but it's meant to look like it's sort of embossed into the word. Yeah. Yeah. Other questions?
Is there a reason why you chose to copy the lettering the embossed instead of taking out?
Yes. Part of that is the idea of invisible illness. So my two chronic medical conditions are considered an invisible illness. You would never know by looking at me that I deal with things. When I have flare-ups, it's hard for me to explain to people what is happening. It's hard to call off work when you look and sound fine, but you're not. So the debossment to me feels like it's something enclosed. It's within, it's sort of hidden, rather than an embossment would have been something that's kind of pushing out into the world. So that's sort of what I was thinking about. Yeah.
There was a certain correlation with why you chose a certain photo for a certain photo.
Yeah, I wanted them to kind of reference each other, and you'll get a little bit of that satirical tongue-in-cheek as you're looking at these things. For example, the blades are comfort. Obviously, that's not comfortable. The tweezers are nuance. They do very small things. That's a uterine sound device, is gentle. I'm not gonna go into exactly how it's used, but it's not gentle. It's not comfy.
These two combine the comfort, like knives and then patience and then scissors and then there's something there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's also just some graphic design considerations, like the speculum with empathy kind of looks like a P. Humanity is over here. It looks like kind of references the A. So there were some graphic design choices, but also some kind of tongue-in-cheek, I'm making a joke choices. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What made you choose just this type of like medical tools, or are you thinking of like expanding into like other tools, or just staying within the realm of these ones?
It was a personal choice. I think as an artist, it's important to make work about what you know. I live in this body, I've experienced this body. Women's health is particularly relevant to me, and I don't pretend to be an expert in everything. So for me, and the perspective that I was looking at this issue in felt important that it was just the gynecological set. I don't think I will expand, simply because I like it to be a little more nuanced, a little more minimal, and again, referencing what I know. This is the body that I live in, this is what I know, this is what I've experienced. So that sort of makes me, the master of the material in that way. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the relationship between photography, because you're a photographer, and design, and how you utilize those two different skills, thought process, and also like planning, especially since there's lots of students in here, like sketchbook, idea generation to final product and that whole process?
Yeah. This project has been going on, I started it probably 2.5 years ago, so it's been a lot of thinking and planning and sitting with these things. I am not a graphic designer by trade. My sister is. I am not. We chose very different paths. Mine is fine art. I don't get paid. Hers is graphic design. She does get paid. But I am also the kind of artist that I need to go where the work is telling me to go. So while I am a photographer, that is what I teach, that is what I know, that is technically, my MFA. I'm labeled a master of that art. I also very much want to do what the work needs. And for that, it was this sense of graphic design and the sense of text. So if you are an artist, or if you want to Google this later, one reference was Barbara Kruger, who does artworks that add text as if they were a billboard. And for me, that felt important. I loved the dichotomy and the push and pull of these kind of personal, intimate words with the sterile instruments. And it just felt like the best way to do that was through graphic design. This is the first that it's come up in my work in that way. Usually I do more strict standard, we call it straight photography. It just felt like that was what I needed. As far as planning, it was a lot of sitting with these, laid out on my kitchen table, being terrified that I would have a guest come in my home and ask me what I was doing. It's a weird thing to walk into. But a lot of sitting with the materials, playing with the materials. It was very much about the pink tile. It was about the shiny metal. It was about the specific font and the way that looked on the page. It was about the perfect shade of pink. It was about the matte paper, and so that it felt kind of smooth and velvety as opposed to something that was very glossy. It was where the materials kind of led me, and a part of that was being guided by the subject matter, which was my experience, what felt like it was speaking my story the best. Yeah.
So, it seems you have a powerful message here that's important and pushing forward for developing a more positive environment for the future of humankind. How can you get your message out a little further, a little beyond, so that maybe it actually has some impact and can affect some change?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. That is what I am trying to do. So I teach at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and they actually just rolled out a new, I don't remember what they called it. Essentially, the school is leaning towards healthcare. That's what they want to specialize in. That's what they're putting quite a bit of money and branding and time and effort into, which makes sense with the work. So when they do that, maybe the arts are not quite as high in the pecking order, but I hope that my work is that bridge. I want to really partner with people in the medical industry, actually nurses. If you look in the library, there are 3 shelves of compassion and women's care within the nursing section. There is 1 small shelf in general and or the physicians, which you know, you're nodding, yes.
I say that not only just women's care, but I think nursing just historically, and the way we teach it. And I always tell my students, I'm not dean the providers, right? They have their unique place in the world, and I think medical school's changing a little, but nurses have always been taught to look at all these things, the humanity. This is a person, right, that you're taking care of. This is someone's mom, someone's your wife, we're talking about women, whatever, but of that whole person, not just their physical aspect.
Yeah.
Nurses have been more, and that's maybe why there's so many shelves, and more interested in women's health, obviously. And
Absolutely.
it's been a predominantly female occupation
Yep.
for decades. So
All of those make sense. Yeah.
all those things that
Yep.
feed that, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the more I can partner with the people in the medical industry, the more profound the message is going to be. Because, most of us in this room, we've experienced this, we know about this, we've been to a doctor's office, maybe we are spending $2,000 on medication, or maybe we are trying to fight for a blood test that is not being offered for some reason. We know this, we don't have a ton of power. The power lies in the hands of the people who have it. So my ideal setting for this work would be a doctor's office, a hospital, at a medical conference, something like that. That is where I view this work as having the most powerful message. Good questions.
So when you were choosing the words,
Yes.
you said that you got emotions from people with the medical devices.
Mm-hmm.
That impact the word choice? Because I know it's a tongue-in-cheek, kind of like a play on the word with the device, the tool.
Mm-hmm.
But did the feedback you get that you got from them affect the words that you chose?
Yeah, the words are from them.
They're from them.
I didn't make up any of these words. These words are all nominated by people who felt like they needed to be shown. Yeah. I simply did the pairing.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you get multiple words for each tool from different people, or was it just kind of like a small survey?
I got the words via the interviews, and then I did the portraits of the tools, so they weren't necessarily looking at the tools while they were giving me the words. Yeah. So I did that pairing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you hear those same words though multiple times?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah. Some of them were a little more unique, but there's the top, 5 to 10 heard over and over and over again, which, that in itself is saying something. Yeah.
I think Luke had a question.
Yeah, I was basically going to say that. I was going to ask, what are the words that you hear most, or you heard most?
Compassion, number 1, I think. Equity. Anything about listening and understanding. From the providers, it was time. I've heard time a lot. So this actually isn't all the work. I actually have 25. I'm only showing 14 here. So I even have more words, which includes things like time, trust, listening. I think for the most part, people want to be cared about and they want to be listened to, first and foremost. Yeah. There were a number of people who gave me things like access, because some people can't even get through the door. They don't have this problem because they can't even get through the door. So there's kind of a threshold of, if you're struggling to even book the appointment, to be able to pay for it, it's things like access. It's things like affordability, obviously. I didn't add that one because it felt like a different conversation, but I heard that one a lot. And then once you get through the door, it's about listening. It's about understanding. It's about that trust. People don't feel like they have that relationship and that trust, which I felt too. I've been fortunate to have a couple of doctors who really look out for me, but I've had far more people who did not care, did not listen, did not even believe what I was telling them.
We have time for a few more questions.
Yeah.
Is there any specific reason you chose to hang them how you did with the 2 gray bars?
Shipping. Yeah, this was a logistical puzzle piece because I drove here, so it's a 10.5-hour drive for me. So I drove all of the work here. Emily, thank you in advance, is going to ship it all back to me. So I really like to do site-specific work. I like to do big sculptures, and I like to do interesting displays and frames, and I don't like to do things typically very traditionally. For this show, I had to, keep it simple, keep it shippable, keep it light. So that's why I did just the plain photos with the 2 bars because they can be shipped. Yeah. Yes.
How would you set it up differently if you didn't have to worry about that?
I almost spent $3,000 printing them on metal. Yeah. I wanted them to be printed on kind of a metal with curved corners, and then they would stand out from the wall. I decided not to spend $3,000 doing that, but that is what I really wanted.
Still have the white border, or would it just be the thing?
It would just be the image, yeah. And then if I could actually get that laser engraved, the words laser engraved into the metal, that'd be cool. If you have a spare $5,000 for me so that I can make this happen, you let me know.
That's a great idea, but as you started talking about that, and I was sitting here looking at them more, but I think just the simple metal bar around them just speaks more to the sterility of the instrument too. So I think it just brings that. I didn't think about that before till that question was asked, and yeah, I think it works, at least for me, for the way you described it.
Yeah, thank you. The metal was a choice. I had color options for me too. It felt like the metal was referencing the instrument. Yeah, and for the data, if I had 1,000 hours and $1,000, I would want to have that printed on actual tile and to be able to tile that back wall with data. That is what I would choose. Yeah. Yeah. My brain does this to me all the time, and then I have to remember, you only have so much money. You have to ship it. Be careful. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a word that you resonate most with, and if so, why?
Oh. Interesting. I haven't thought about that one because you have to love all of your babies equally. But I have 2. And they're the ones that I started with, and I think where you start is a sign. That's what you're drawn to. But tenderness and compassion, those are mine. The tenderness, those are umbilical snips. And I found that particularly relevant because it is, you are cutting, you are harming something, but you kind of have to in this, it's about birth, but birth is ugly and painful and dangerous often. So for me, the idea of tenderness made sense, and compassion first and foremost, at least for me. I wish that people were a little more compassionate. I wish my caregivers had that sense of compassion towards me, which again, I've had a little bit, but not as much as I would have hoped for. I think a lot of my personal medical history could have been cut much shorter if people just had some compassion. So those were my words. You asked me that, right? Who asked me? You asked me that. What's your favorite word?
I keep looking at comfort and empathy.
Why?
As you said earlier, the sort of comfort, and then with the knives, I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
And then
empathy.
I just think it's powerful. I think all of them are powerful.
Yeah, that's the tool that makes your guts clench. Yeah, yeah.
And that one is kind of interesting too, because designed by a male, I
Yep.
would not have any concept of what that would feel like as a patient, right? And I think, you know, even things like the position in which women deliver babies is really for the comfort of the physician historically, not because that's the best position. So I think that one really captures a lot of that history in one picture.
100%.
Yeah, just as terrible history. So that actually was developed, that's a Sims speculum. It was developed by Dr. Sims, who originally had a bent spoon. It was a bent pewter spoon originally, and did a little bit of R&D to make it slightly better, but actually did public experiments on black female slaves and would do this on things like street corners. He was quoted as saying a lot of his research and his discoveries were through experimentation and exploration. Probably not great for those patients. And this resulted in his statue being taken down from, it was in Central Park in New York City, because he was the grandfather of gynecology, right? And he had a lot of inventions. He discovered and learned things. So he had a lot of accolades for a long time for that, and then people realized, oh, he was actually kind of a horrible person and he did horrible things. So they took that statue down in 2017, I believe.